going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now.
Jimothy.
Now, ladies and gents, this is the aforementioned duel between Speedroid and I believe my buddy is playing Mekk Knight Orcust, which is an interesting combo. So yeah, he starts off his turn using a orchestrated return to draw 2 cards. Now, bear in mind, ladies and gents, this Mekk Knight Orcust deck is somewhat of a bit of a mishmash that he tried to put together, and it proved to work pretty well. I was a bit dubious, mainly because the Orcust cards will lock you into darks, and then obviously all of the Mekk Knight monsters are light psychic type, so there's synergy in terms of the lore, but in terms of the actual cards it can be difficult. But he's managed to pull it off to a somewhat workable degree. So he's just thinking about his plays here. He does need to make sure that he sequences his plays correctly, because obviously if he does go into his Orcusts too early, he will lock out the Mekk Knight section of the deck, and so forth. So he's decided to activate a reinforcement of the army, and I believe he's searching either a Dark Grepher or potentially an Armageddon Knight. Now, Orcusts are in an interesting spot. They can grind. I don't feel like they do anything truly unfair, especially when you got decks like Eldritch running around in the meta, which can just keep recurring itself. Orcus work in a similar way, where they use their graveyard as a resource and just keep recurring advantage turn over turn. Now, obviously, they're not as strong as they once were, mainly because the banning of Harp Horror, which was a major consistency bump to the deck, meaning that they were less consistent. And with the introduction of Girsu, the Orcust Mekk Knight, they do have some powerful plays, but obviously if you stop their normal summon, they're pretty much stuck as it is. So anyway, he decides to activate his Armageddon Knight, and he's looking for a dump. I believe he's going to dump his Orcust Nightmare. Now, like I did say, if he does activate Orcust Nightmare, he will be locked into darks for the rest of the turn, which is probably not a problem. Obviously, I don't know his starting hand, and he's just going through his plays. So he's deliberating here. I think we're deciding on well, he was just talking to me about what he should potentially build next, or something along those lines anyway. But anyway, he's thinking about his plays. Again, it is very normal summon reliant, and I did not draw any hand traps, I'm afraid, so there was no potential of me interacting with his board in any meaningful way on his turn. So he's able to just basically pop off, do exactly what he likes, summon where he wants, set where he wants. He can use Galatea, he can use Symbol Skeleton, he can do whatever he wants basically. So he's there, he's setting up his graveyard. He's dumped Symbol Skeleton by banishing the Orcust Nightmare, and then I believe he's going to special summon his Orcust Nightmare back straight from the banish pile by banishing his World Legacy World Wand, which then will allow him to go into a Link monster, which is probably going to be his Galatea, to then shuffle the wand back in and set an orchestrated Babel from his deck straight to the field. Very powerful play. Babel allows you to play on your opponent's turn, which is just fantastic. Turns all your Orcust monsters into quick effects. So there is some potential there. Now, the potential combo route I probably would have went for is to try and get Girsu in the graveyard by potentially reviving it off the Symbol Skeleton. Because once you've got Girsu in the graveyard, obviously he's an interruption by himself. Being able to non-target send a opponent's monster from the field to graveyard, as well as protect your whole field by detaching the material. So he can be very useful, very flexible depending on the situation you're in and the setup that you've got. So he decides to go into a Galatea. Obviously he shuffled back in his World 1 to set his orchestrated Babel. He's just checking his graveyard to make sure he's got all of his effects there. He can't really do much as yet, so he decides to special summon his Orcust Nightmare back via Symbol Skeleton's effect. Now, I was fearing Rusty Bardiche here. I did think he was going to link 3 into Bardiche, but he's decided to go into a Galatea and a Orcust Nightmare and leave it at that. I think he's thinking about his plays. But like I said, not the most optimal of setups, but then it largely depends on what his hand was. Because he's playing some of the Mekk Knights as well, that's probably as far as he could go with the hand that he was dealt. So it is what it is. So I start off my Speedroid plays by special summoning Takatomborg. One of you just love to see, ladies and gents. Absolutely crazy. Now he does, I believe, have the, yep, he does. He has the orchestrated crescendo set, which is fine. So my Takatomborg gets banished. I don't get the effect to add, but that's not a problem. So one of his main forms of interaction is actually gone from the field. So I proceed to normal summon my marble machine. And we was just checking about what's happening with the Orcust effects. Obviously he's got Babble on the field, so he can activate his Orcust effects whenever he feels like. So by right he could potentially shuffle in his Symbol Skeleton by using Galatea's effect, and then set an orchestrated crescendo or a orchestrated return straight from the deck to the field. But anyway, I am going to normal summon my marble machine, and then I'm searching for a valid target. I'm going to add the car turbo. And I'm just thinking of my plays here. I can't remember exactly what I had in hand, but nevertheless, Speedroids have just some crazy extenders. Depending on how you play it and how you sequence it, you can go and go and go. It's crazy. So I've burnt my normal summon, but it's not too much of a problem in this deck because you can go into the high speed rubber band shooter. You can actually get an additional normal summon. So I managed to special summon my rubber band plane. Oops, it looks like I just knocked something off the field. High speed special summon my rubber band plane, mainly because I special summon Takatomborg. So Takatomborg would allow me to get Denden Daiko Duke straight from the deck to the field by tributing himself. I am locked into wins for the rest of the turn, but as I said, ladies and gents, if you've seen the profile, we predominantly play wins in this deck. In fact, I don't think we play another attribute. So here I decide to go into a synchro summon. So I use my Denden Daiko Duke and my marble machine, and I believe I go into high Speedroid Haguita, I believe. So if you control a Speedroid tuner, you can special summon it from the grave. I was just checking the levels to make sure that it could actually be done, because basically the play that you want to go for, ladies and gents, is to get into your just checking my play. So special summon car turbo. You want to go into your crystal wing as early as possible, because that's your main form of interaction on your opponent's turn. Very oppressive boss monster, difficult to beat over in battle, and it does have a monster negate. But instead I decide to go for high Speedroid Kite Drake. Now this is interesting. So Kite Drake can actually just blow up all cards on the field. So he does chain the Galatea to shuffle in his Symbol Skeleton to be able to set a card to the field. But he just realized that if he does do that, then obviously high Speedroid Kite Drake is going to nuke everything once the effect resolves. So he goes into his deck searching for a valid target, which was a bit of a misplay by him. I do believe that you can actually use Galatea's effect without needing to set, but because he's committed to the set, obviously all cards on field get blown up apart from the Kite Drake. So again, I have got in my graveyard a few extended. So I've got Denden Daiko Duke, who can actually special summon a tuner from the graveyard by banishing itself. And I've got a high Speedroid Kite Drake. Now, what I was trying to amass, ladies and gents, was the ability to go into an OTK, but my maths was slightly off, to be honest. So I banished the Denden Daiko Duke to special summon back my car turbo. And then Haguita's effect, because I control a tuner, I can special it back to the field, which then allows me to go into my crystal wing, which is absolutely fantastic. So then I decide to use Car Turbo's effect to banish himself and another Speedroid tuner, Speedroid card, monster card from the graveyard. I'm just deciding on which ones to actually get rid of here, and that will boost all wind monsters on the field by 800 attack. Now, if I thought about it clearly, ladies and gents, I could have potentially attacked. I could have potentially went into high Speedroid Chanbara and done 44 damage, but obviously I didn't think too deeply about it, so ended up going into this. I was actually 400 points off lethal, but nevertheless I do have a high Speedroid Kite Drake on field, which will allow me to add back from graveyard should he get destroyed. And then obviously I've got a negate in the form of Crystal Ring. So I haven't got much in terms of interaction, so I do need to make sure I time this this negate carefully. Now he is on limited life points, so any wrong move or anything that he doesn't do effectively, he will actually die. So he manages to special summon his Dark Greffer, which will allow him to get a dump, and he actually dumped off Greffer to summon it, which is a really powerful effect. I understand why Greffer's actually at 1, because he's so much of an enabler. Getting stuff into your graveyard is just invaluable, especially if you got cards that can set it up. So I was just thinking what to do here. I think he discarded a danger, so he actually goes and grabs himself a Jackalope, because I think he discarded the Nessie from his hand, if I'm not mistaken. So he reveals a Jackalope to special summon Jackalope. I let that go through. Typically when you've got a negate on board, ladies and gents, you want to kind of hold it for either negating the summon of a boss monster or negating the boss monster itself. So he decides to, I managed to snipe his Mekk Knight Blue Sky, which probably was one of his starting cards, believe it or not. So then he proceeds to go into his Predaplant Verte Anaconda, and I believe here, ladies and gents, he actually may even scoop, from what I understand. Because thinking about it, he went to go into his Predaplant Verte Anaconda, but obviously he does not have the life points to pay, because I did 7600 damage in the previous turn. So when he actually realizes this, he realizes that Anaconda would have been a dead draw. Dragoon would have been a nice card to actually have. I'm not too sure if it would have been able to beat over the Crystal Wing, because obviously I could have changed the negate, and he actually drew the Nibiru for turn, which was absolutely crazy. So yeah, it is what it is, ladies and gents. That is game 1 to Speedroids. Okay, ladies and gents, so coming into game number 2, so my opponent decides to make me go first, which is a little bit worrying, because it makes me kind of think what he sided in order for him to be so confident and allowing me to go first. But nevertheless, obviously we draw him for turn. So obviously what I was saying before, ladies and gents, in game 1 is Crystal Wing is probably one of your most oppressive boss monsters. I do have a Virtual World Kyubi Shenshen, which I will be putting into this deck as well, because it allows me to get some powerful first turn plays. And believe it or not, even though he cut my deck about 16,000 times, I managed to draw a Takatomborg off the top, which is just absolutely crazy. As a one-of, that card is just amazing. So Takatomborg activates, sorry, not Takatomborg, Teratop activates to get the Takatomborg. Takatomborg specials itself to allow me to special a tuner from deck, which is in this case going to be Denden Daiko Duke, which is absolutely fantastic, mainly because I haven't used my normal summon, which is just crazy. So thinking about my plays here, thinking about where I want to go with this deck. Now, another scenario that you could set up would be to go into your Crystal Ring and go into your Wing Pegasus at Ignista, just for an additional form of disruption. So if your Crystal Wing should die for any reason, you can obviously use your Wing Pegasus at Ignista to shuffle a card on the field back into the deck. It also pops a card on Summer, which is crazy. So yeah, I activate 1 for 1 because I had another Takatomborg in hand, which was just amazing, which allows me to get my Red Eye Dice. So Red Eye Dice hits the field, and obviously he's going to be able to level modulate. Now bear in mind, I still have not used my normal summon. I've got 2 more cards in hand, and I will have Denden Daiko Duke in graveyard for some setup here. So I'm just deliberating. Activate Red Eye Dice's effect when on summon, basically to modulate his level, which then will have the correct levels in order to go into my high Speedroid Haguita. And obviously I've got a synchro monster on field as well as a level 3 tuner, which then will allow me to go into my first crystal wing, which is just absolutely crazy. So then I normal summon my marble machine, which is just fantastic draws, ladies and gents. This deck, man, I just love it. It's not the most powerful deck, but it's just got extenders for days. And I believe my opponent was saying to me here, he's watching me combo off with a battery charger, a marble machine. He was just like, what are all these weird cards that are hitting the field? But anyway, I special summon my car turbo, which then allows me to special back my Hagwita. And I was reading Crystal Wing's effect here. I just wanted to check if his effect was a hard once per turn, which upon reading, it is not, ladies and gents. So when I realized this, I was like, right, I am definitely 100% going into another Crystal Wing. I was also thinking about what I could do next in terms of interaction. So again, there's a few things that I could do. So I make the next Crystal Wing, ladies and gents. Now, what I will say is when you're placing cards, make sure you're clear on where you're leaving your cards. Because Geonada Transversa is definitely a card, as well as Relinquished Anima. So if you're leaving anything in front of the extra monster zone, you need to be aware of what it is. Hopefully it's not anything important. So again, I use Denden Daiko Duke Engraved to banish itself, to special summon my car turbo back, and then I decide to go into my high Speedroid rubber band shooter, which is the link 2 for the in archetype Speedroids, which is a fantastic card actually. It does so much for the deck. It allows you to gain an additional normal summon, as well as I think I needed to banish here. It allows you to banish a synchro monster, a win synchro monster from your extra deck in order to add 2 cards from your deck to your hand that equal that synchro monster's level, and then your opponent randomly chooses one to go to the graveyard and the other one gets added to the hand. You can then actually normal summon again by activating its effect. So I decided to banish my Clearing Fast Dragon because it's probably not going to be useful going forward. It dies really quickly, your Clearing, but it can be a bit of annoying. It can be a bit of a menace if you've got other cards on field that your opponent wants to beat over. So I'm grabbing my double yo-yo, and this is just mainly for a follow-up basically, because I've only got 1 card in hand. So double yo-yo should allow me to actually normal summon it and then special summon a Speedroid monster from my graveyard. And then I actually grab a Denden Daiko Duke. That's just for an additional graveyard setup, just in case. Now, obviously, he's going to snipe one, so I can't be too sure of which one I'm going to get. But either way, I should be in a good position to be able to proceed on my next turn. So I'm shuffling up here, just deliberating with my opponent, thinking about what next player could potentially make. I cannot remember what card my last card was in hand. So I shuffle up, and this is something that you should always do, ladies and gents. And then my opponent gets to choose one. You're just confirming that that was the card on field, and he manages to snipe my double yo-yo, which is not a problem. Thinking about it, I potentially should have got Horse Prince and Daiko Duke. So I proceed to set one. Now I believe the card that I set was a Forbidden Chalice. But anyway, my opponent starts off his turn. He actually activates Allure of Darkness, which is interesting. It's not necessarily something I would play, but he decides to banish first without drawing, which was a bit of a misplay on his part, because he would have probably potentially used his Symbol Skeleton to do some various graveyard plays. But now that he's in a banish pile, that is one less interaction I have to worry about. He decides to take it back. I said that he could, it's not a problem. So he takes that back, he banishes something that is probably not as useful as he thought it was. Thinking about his plays here, I'm looking at his grip, and he does actually have some decent cards. So then he actually activates his Orchestrated Return to draw a couple of cards, as well as get graveyard set up. Such a strong card, Orchestrated Return. And he actually he reveals one of his bricks in deck. Now obviously he's playing the Dragoon package in his Orcust deck. And he just revealed to me that he drew the red eyes off the top, which is obviously a waste. Now he knows that he needs to play through a couple of synchro wings, crystal wings. So he special summons his Mekk Knight purple Nightfall. It proceeds to activate its effect. Obviously I'm not going to let that go through because it's just going to plus off me. So that gets negated and destroyed. Now I do have another negate in the form of another crystal wing, and I also have my set card, which is Forbidden Chalice. Now thinking about plays here, he goes to activate, I believe it is his Grepher, and I chain the Forbidden Chalice, targeting it. So he gets a bit of a bump. Yeah, it was his Dark Grepher. He was looking to dump to graveyard. He is highly out of resources here. He's still got his he's still got his Red Eyes Dark Dragon in hand. Proceeds to activate his danger. I decided to just blow up his danger in hand because it activated effect. So now he's left with a Grepher on field and a dark Red Eyes Dark Dragon in hand, which is not going to be doing anything. And I also believe he set a orchestrated crescendo to the field. Now obviously that crescendo is not live because he doesn't control a link monster. So he's in a bit of a precarious position. Obviously I draw for turn. I've got graveyard set up. I actually rip off the top Speedroid Domino Butterfly, which allows me to add back from my banish pile. Now someone suggested in the comments to take this card out, and to be honest I do agree, but in this instance it actually came in quite well because I was low on hand resources. I did have quite a strong field presence. It just meant that I could actually continue to pop off. So I normal summon Daiko Duke, which then allows me to get back my Haguita, which I put into defense position for some crazy misplay. But talking to my opponent, obviously we were totaling it up, and we can clearly see, well not clearly, but it's quite official that I have got game on board. Obviously if he was to survive this, I've got 2 crystal wings in the form of negates, and I've got quite a few monsters on field. So he's just checking his graveyard here, seeing if there's anything that he could potentially do on his following turn. He did have a Symbol Skeleton engraved, but obviously he couldn't do anything with it, and I negated his purple Nightfall, so he was in a bit of a precarious position. So I'm checking my graveyard here, and I'm thinking to myself, what could I potentially do next, because I wanted to secure game. So I decided to synchro again. And that might be a bit of a misplay, ladies and gents, because Den Daiko Duke is actually a level 3, and Haguita is a level 5. But nevertheless, ladies and gents, it would have been game anyway. It would have been game anyway, because he wouldn't have ripped off the top. He potentially wouldn't have been able to play anyway. So afterwards we was just discussing what happened. Yeah, my opponent decides to concede, and that is it, ladies and gents. Swift 2-0 with Speedroids. He would have ripped off a Mekk Knight Orcust Girsu off the top, but obviously I would have had 2 crystal wings on field, which would have just negated and destroyed it and just basically put him in a bad position. So it is what it is, ladies and gents. Now hopefully you enjoyed the content, and if you did, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.